Hi, everybody. Welcome to ZoomInfo's Revenue Ready Marketing Series, More Than MQLs, How Marketers Build Sales-Ready Journeys That Convert. We really appreciate you joining us today, and we're going to kick things off shortly, but we just want to cover some housekeeping items really quickly. First thing first, if you have any technical issues, feel free to use the Q&A chat box that's located in the left-hand side of your screen. We will be monitoring that very closely and are happy to help you with any issues. Again, we also want to make sure that if you have questions, we're here to answer them. So you can use that same Q&A chat box on the left-hand side. Feel free to submit your questions that come up. We're going to have some time set aside at the end of this session to answer your questions. So again, feel free to submit that. We are recording the session today, so this will be recorded, and then we're going to be sending out the replay within 48 hours after we conclude. So definitely keep an eye on your inbox. Last but not least, with the housekeeping, I do have to run through our safe harbor statement, and it's right there. This is kind of lengthy, but we do have to read it. ZoomInfo is a publicly traded company. This presentation may contain forward-looking statements. Any buying decision you make should be made based only upon currently available products and offerings. And again, our complete harbor statement is right here for you to review in the slide deck. All right, that's enough with housekeeping. We are going to introduce our fabulous panelists. So I would like to welcome today our experts, Diksha Tanesha, VP of Growth and Optimization at ZoomInfo. In addition, our partners, Kat Guyvet, Head of Demand Gen with Acton, and David Fortino is General Manager at NetLine. So I want to thank all three of you for joining us for this live panel today. We appreciate you taking time out of your busy, hectic day. Diksha, I think we're going to kick it off with you just to give a brief intro with your background.
Yes, thank you, Dory, for bringing us all together. Hi, I'm Diksha. I'm VP of Marketing at ZoomInfo, and I lead our always-on programs as well as marketing operations. I have demand gen, paid media, funnel analytics as a part of my gamut of things that I work on. But generally speaking, I focus on optimizing performance and driving growth at scale. I have heavily been spending time on the signal-based plays that are not just about generating demand, but activating it at the right time and the right message, which a lot of our conversation today will be about. So I'm excited also to hear from Kat and David, how they're activating it on their side of the house, and if we can learn together and share some nuggets here together. Thank you.
Perfect. We'll hand it off to you, Kat, just to give a brief intro.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Kat Guyvet. I lead the demand gen efforts at Acton. I have over 15 years of tech marketing experience and really excited to be here to talk about more than MQLs and, really being that conduit between sales and marketing. So thanks for having me.
Thanks, Kat. David, on to you.
Yeah, Dave Fortino, GM over here at NetLine. NetLine was acquired by Informa, about 4 years ago. They're publicly traded too, based in London. And then we've recently taken majority ownership of TechTarget, forging a new company called Informa TechTarget, of which NetLine stands as a unique GTM. My history has been a bit of a muck, but always in the content to pipeline kind of origination, whether it's on the media side of the space or working with demand gen marketers themselves. Currently, this GM role is a bit of a mutt as well, right? Taking on the responsibilities of everything inside the business. So super passionate about helping marketers develop pipeline by programmatically distributing content to today's prospects so they can become tomorrow's buyers.
Great. Thank you, David. All right, so we've got a great session today for you. We're going to kick it off with this first kind of lead-in question, and I think we'll start with you, Diksha. It's a challenge that we all know too well, and that's leads that stall right at the handoff. The ones that look really good on paper, but they're not quite ready for sales. So Diksha, I guess, what have you seen work when it comes to avoiding, those early handoffs that really do waste a lot everybody's time?
Yeah, like sales and marketing alignment, I feel like I've spoken about this topic like many times as to, a common pain point. At ZoomInfo, what I'll say is what we've really been focusing on is tightening that gray zone between what we call as like marketing qualified versus what, sales will say they're sales ready. And the biggest unlock, I would say, and we're still working on that, has been moving a little bit away from static scoring. And not that static scoring was bad when we did it, because it was looking at, historical data, seeing what worked and using that to adjust your scoring. But today's environment is changing so dynamically that the static scoring that at one point worked for us is not scaling to the dynamic nature of the macro environment today. And I think that has been that has what created like a bigger gap between what marketing is saying on paper, looking like marketing qualified, and what sales, when they get it, saying it's sales ready. Like even with good signals, alignment at the end of the day is everything. And bringing those SDRs, AEs, AMs in that common room and having the conversation with them, what good looks like in your day-to-day, in your week-to-week, in your month-to-month, has been instrumental in making sure that even the dynamic scoring that I am spending my efforts to build on is aligned with how sales and marketing and what they're hearing in the market, and is dynamically changing using that feedback. Plays that are triggered based on fit and intent with a clear exit criteria before the exit even happens is important. What we've also started doing is we started running regular audits, like which were the leads that have actually converted, what were the different breadcrumbs, what were the intent signals. Those were intent signals, good, but the strength perhaps was not strong enough, and we gave it a little bit early, and we needed to nurture more. That feedback loop has become even more important. And I also know, having been in B2B marketing for a while now, sales is your ears to the ground. They are your best friends. And the sooner you start like thinking about them as your best friends and not somebody who's trying to like not work your leads, I feel like you can get really good success and become like true partners with them in your go-to-market journey to drive pipeline and revenue. Eventually, like that's where the rubber meets the road. Like, are we getting the pipe and are we getting the revenue? And if you're aligned and if you're focused, that alignment can help you also better define the leads, but also help you close those leads into revenue.
I love that. Yeah, it's a personal passion of mine, of running around inside the company, constantly vocalizing that marketing doesn't sign contracts with clients. So sales does, right? So every single thing that we do, we are here to do that on behalf of our sellers, make them successful. As a byproduct, yes, we get pats on the back. We get to learn operational efficiencies and campaign optimizations and so on. They don't necessarily need to care about that, right? The goal is the goal for the company. We need to execute against doing that as best as possible. I think when we were going back up a level and talking about where things stall, a lot of times I think there's a misinterpretation of intent as well, and what it means to have someone expressing intent for the organization, your content, your campaign, and so on. And so what we've been able to identify through our own research actually is that there's a phrase of a time gap, which is called the content consumption gap. And it's basically the time in between when a user or a prospect is actually checking out something of yours, whether they're registering for a white paper, a webinar, whatever it might be, and the time that they actually get around to consuming it, that tends to be close to 40 hours. When you feed that lead specifically, even if it met all of your ICP criteria, it had additional intent signal weighting that would say this is sales ready. The reality of it is what happens here is the time to respond still matters, but what you say in that response windows matters more. And what I mean by that is that more often than not, a lot of SDR motions are built around quickly touching users who quickly touch something of yours, saying, hey, thanks for checking out this webinar of ours, or thanks for checking out this ebook or white paper. The challenge with that is that it takes nearly 40 hours for the average prospect to actually get into consume that content. So you're reaching out to a person being somewhat tone deaf, right? It's as if you sat down at the restaurant and the person says, what would you like for dessert? And it's like, well, I haven't actually literally even placed an order and you haven't given me the menu yet. And so that's kind of what's happening with SDRs. And it's critical that we as marketers educate them and educate our seller cohorts that it's not the speed alone that matters. It's what you say that matters the most. In our case, we tend to lean in heavily into tools that allow us to kind of lead with values. So quickly, what that means is instead of sending them some more content, we'll actually send them a tool that helps them further refine and understand their own ICP. And they can play around with it and they can save the settings and so on, and it's completely free. Behind the scenes, though, we get all of these great nuggets of information that help inform our sellers to say, oh, their ICP is directors and above of this functional discipline, working in companies of this size, and so on and so forth. At that point, that dramatically kind of weaponizes discovery calls so that you don't even need to ask those questions. They've already told our system who they're trying to target, and they've already started to engage with our brand. So yeah, I can keep going forever, but onwards.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's so important to have the constant communication and feedback with your sales and SDRs, as well as like taking into consideration the timing and the actions and the lead scoring, right? So we've all been there. We've all had that frustration of like, technically this lead is qualified, but it stalls. And at Acton, we like to look at like beyond the lead scoring and take into consideration the orchestration. Marketing automation is that platform, and it acts as a conduit between real buyer intent and that data enrichment. So we combine firmographic, demographic, behavioral insights, and then we actually use AI to dynamically score and route leads based on their actual purchase readiness. So I think, one of the points that you were just saying is, considering that timing and how they consume that content, and I think AI will actually help dynamically score when it's the right time to reach out. And then using marketing automation, like the handoff, is more of an exchange with sales, and they receive the leads with the context, the narrative, and the timing, and it's all automated. So that results in fewer cold calls, faster pipeline progression, and I think building trust between sales, or having sales trust marketing more.
I think your mention about context to sales is so huge, right? The fact that they can actually see what marketing's doing and understand the appropriate context as to what my prospect is actually experiencing at that moment makes it so much more actionable for them and easily understood, because the normal stand-up meetings, they're absorbing a ton of information. It's typically, a slice of that is retained, and that's not their fault. So constantly reinforcing what you're doing, why you're doing it, and what the actual user saw is critical.
Agreed.
Yeah. If I were to just piggyback off of the context, I think that you just both brought like an amazing point. And I think for the longest, like I want to say that there has always been context, but the depth of context has evolved over time. And what I mean by that is there was some level of context saying they did fill out the form in this campaign, or they did XYZ, but it was very one-dimensional in a lot of ways. And I think what has happened and what AI has been able to unlock for us is to not only like curate multiple touch points into a more human readable context. And I'm going to talk more about it as the conversation progresses, but also trying to say, so what about this context? And telling them that they don't need to know all of these, because they did actions like these, together they rally up to something that leads to the next best action of this kind. So I think the context itself, like the definition of that has been evolving. And AI is also unlocking a lot of things right now in getting that more multidimensional view of an account or a lead into a seller's hand in a lot quicker and an actionable way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Which has been great.
Yeah, I love that. I think, when you think about AI and the ability it brings to the table around mass data consolidation and curation of really confined outputs, that's the most helpful part for a seller. They don't have the time to sift through everything. They certainly don't have this time to sift through every marketing related output either. And so the ability to kind of augment normal behavior with AI influenced attributes and outputs is quite exciting, honestly, for everyone in the space. If you're not excited by that, maybe change your career. because buckle up. That's the only way it's going to be. But I think the underlying tone of kind of trying to extrapolate indicators from really kind of informed and descriptive engagement has been a challenge for humans to understand. And so sifting through intent signals, especially when they're only account-based versus person-level decision-making and engagement, it's been something that humans, regardless of the tools they're using, have struggled with. AI nicely kind of allows there to be a marriage between all of those signals and simple outputs. And then those can be created into like actionable and simple plays.
Love it.
Agreed.
Just all great advice. Just on the interest of time, I know we want to move on to the next section, and this section really has a lot to do with the confusion between intent and engagement signals and then when to use it. And I know there's a lot of confusion, David, so I'm curious just to hear from you how your teams distinguish between intent signals and engagement signals, and then when should marketers lean into one versus the other? So.
Yeah, so not to get into too much of our own business's philosophy, we really view intent as a bit of an indicator. It's directional, it's completely helpful. Engagement, though, is a validator, right? Engagement is something more than visiting a handful of web pages for a few milliseconds that are contextually aligned to what we do. Engagement, when layered with scoring and expanded lenses by looking at buying groups and buying networks, allows you to further understand the true impact and resonance of what you are doing, what you're educating the market to be, and how these people potentially can become your customers tomorrow. The challenge with intent data, in many cases, not all, is that it's a bit obtuse. It's a bit untangible or intangible, whereby you are looking at account level data. It's showing you that directionally this account is expressing an interest in topic X. Ultimately, you don't know who, so you're stuck in this vicious loop of trying to figure out the who and chasing somewhat of ghosts inside an account. When you marry that with engagement data, then you're able to kind of work from both angles, right? You're coming at it from an account overlay and being really fine-tuned to discrete accounts, but simultaneously understanding key influencers and key buyers inside those accounts that will inform and make a decision. One thing we're really passionate about is using progressive profiling on our own platform that takes form of like an HQL product, which ultimately is about understanding truly the pain points that these individuals have, the timelines to invest in those, and ultimately if there's even funding involved in those types of decisions. So it's always a balance, and I hate saying that on webinars, where it's like you've got to take all perspectives in and kind of come to something that makes sense for you. I think this is a great example that where AI can help you. You don't have to do this on your own, right? You can take all of these various signals and even raw lead attributes and use a very simple AI tool to help curate some clarity around how to approach that account or set of buyers in the given account.
Awesome. I guess we'll kick it over to Kat, just on that same vein with intent and engagement signals. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think, intent signals and engagement signals are very powerful, but they're not interchangeable. Intent tells us, what problems they're researching, where I see engagement is, how they're actually engaging with your brand, right? So, at Acton, of course, we use marketing automation to be that connective tissue, where we pull in that third-party intent data enriched with firmographics, and then we merge that information with engagement history. And then, as we're all saying, then we use our AI-driven scoring model, and that really helps us respond to true buying signals. So I think, it's great to understand the difference between the two signals, but how do they integrate to give you that information you need for the buyer intent and the signals?
Awesome. Diksha, what about ZoomInfo on the ZI side?
We talk about intent all the time. And I mean, honestly, like when I think about it, intent and engagement, when we think about intent, there is things about like low, medium, high intent, right? There is also things about the signal strength of those intent signals. And the topic itself, the intent topic itself could mean like whether you're in the early journey stages or you're in the middle of the funnel stages, or you're like really closer towards like, you know what you want and you're like researching about that, right? And the similar thing about engagement, right? Like there is an engagement which could actually happen before intent because you don't know and you just like stumbled upon a webinar like this and you learned about something which triggered different signals for you, started doing research, and then an engagement. So a lot of the time that we've like, to what David is saying earlier and Kat is saying, there is not one size fits all. And it's about context, which is what we're talking about. But for me, the intent is things that are happening outside of the general assets that are pushed out by your individual company, right? So there are certain like searches happening either about competitors or research about topics that are like more broader, or they could be even searching about you in different, like a G2 or a different, different websites or your competitors for that matter. Each of those intent signals are at different stages of the funnel. Similar to that, an engagement like, a very top of the funnel thought leadership webinar versus a bottom of the funnel engagement with our free trial motion or getting a PLG for the things, very different in terms of, again, engagement. What makes it really cool is bringing them all together and seeing how they weave together in a customer journey. And how do we then use those layering together in conjunction with, of course, your firmographic data, in conjunction with the segment data, in conjunction with your technographic data, to then say, eventually it's all about, honestly, the first question you asked, handing it off to sales, right? Handing it off to the next best action. And the layering together only enhances the scoring outside of the firmographic, technographic data, to then understand where your customer is in their journey and how do you ensure that you're moving them through that journey, either with your marketing touch points, sales touch points, or in some combination of those touch points as they progress through the funnel. We have been, coaching our teams internally to lean in heavily on the intent data for like account prioritization, engagement sequences, and messaging. And that also is important, right? Because that helps you with contextual messaging, right? Message at the right time. But it is not one versus the other. It's one on top of the other. And then making sure you're adding context to understand where in the journey people are and how do you engage your different like marketing motions around it, and sales.
Yeah, I love that. I think one thing I always try to stress around that is that the sales funnel doesn't mirror structurally the same thing as the buyer's journey, right? So the buyer's journey, to your point, you could drop in your first touch point with a brand might be something extremely bottom of funnel oriented, just by chance. Might have came across something, caught your eye, right? If you went to a seller and said, hey, this person's ready to buy because this is our most bottom of funnel oriented piece of content, you're setting that seller up for some disappointment. And so there's a lot more that goes into that. And I think being smart about interlinking all of your various resources and content to support the chaos that is a buyer's journey, and understand that the entry point into the funnel will still follow a very traditional sales progression. But the actual buyer's journey itself is constantly amorphous, and I don't see that even accelerating. It'll just get worse as we persist.
Yeah, that's such a great point. I love that you use the term chaos. It's not as linear as we all once thought or hoped.
Just find comfort in it, and then you're good.
Embrace the chaos. Moving along that, as we talk about like the buyer's journey, poor timing is a key thing as we move into this next section, and mismatched outreach that really does kill the momentum. And so, Diksha, I think we'll start with you. Like, I hear from you all the time, like timing is everything. Can you talk about the importance of like aligning the outreach to buyer signals, and what happens when the timing's off?
Like I think it just piggyback off of what we were earlier saying, like weaving in how these intent and engagement signals are blending in what part of the journey, and then ensuring that it's not just about like right message at the right time in a more static way. It's about orchestrating that journey and being injecting yourself through different messages, but not just that, like different messages different messages from different senders within the company, from different platforms within the company, from different mediums, there is so many dimensions and variables into this equation. So it's a combination of that. One of the things that I do want to share that we have rolled out more recently in the last 8-9 months. And we were doing portions of that, but we've really honed in on this, is creating a funnel similar to your MQL funnel and account funnel, but thinking about account funnel from the context of high, medium, low signal strength. And signal strength, I say it loosely, it's not just your intent signals. It's a little bit more nuanced than that, where we are looking at your first party data of your engagement. And engagement is also based on whether you are raising your hand on the website versus engaging with the webinar, and each one of them having its own level of scoring, coupled with second party signals about any of your, the G2s and the trust radius and any of the reviewer sites and what is happening over there. Mm-hmm. And then the third party signals about, and when I say actually the first party signals, not just about people filling out the form, but also websites, right? People coming to your different assets, may not be actually filling out the form, but engaging there. Mm-hmm. And then the third party signals around jobs that they are hiring for, the number of personas within their company and where they're focused, right? The actual signals that the people are searching for. So layering it all of that to then say, for an account, you're either spiking high, medium, low on a signal, and what that signal is in terms of your use case based on the actions you're taking. And that kind of was also what I was touching about in terms of context. It's not just about a context about you did 5 things and I want to give SDR and my BDRs that visibility, which they always want. They always the easiest way for an outreach is, hey, you joined my webinar. And what we're trying to move away from is not just it could be a right message and the right time because, hey, you did join the webinar and you did all of those things, but it's about orchestrating that message. It's making sure that it's more contextual and trying to go towards the pain point and the solution, as opposed to this is what ZoomInfo can provide. It's trying to weave your pain points into the solution based on where you are, and orchestrating that together has been it's been a journey for us. We are still on it, but taking how the SDRs are now using this information. I mean, my world is building this all at scale is how do I create, AI snippets which leverage this information to create snapshots for the SDRs, to give them the talk track, to give them things that they need to put on LinkedIn. That has been the most amazing highlight of my career itself, saying, oh my goodness, we are to handing off the leads to really doing the account orchestration has been amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. If only you had access to a tool that does all of that, right?
Yeah.
It was a layup. I had to. Yeah, I think what you just described is really an orchestrated experience with the account and with buyers, right? You're absorbing all of this information, whether that's intentionally shared by the user or subliminally shared and or through third party, second party, first party, even zero party intent data. But all of that's about understanding that full picture and reacting accordingly, right? You can't just be absorbing a ton of data and yet your selling motion remains the same. It's well, what's kind of the point then of accumulating all the data if it doesn't find its way to be contextual, to define a larger experience, not just for one person in an account, but the overarching account itself and all of the various influencers that live there. So yeah, it's exciting. It's some cool stuff that you're definitely working on there. It's fun.
Yeah, I love this topic. It's something I feel like we're talking about on a weekly basis, if not more. I think, timing is everything. And of course, not to be a broken record, but, marketing automation is how we nail it. We leverage AI and those behavioral data to trigger the outreach at the moments that signaling readiness, not just awareness. But, we also use that enriched data to personalize. So one thing is we want to make sure you're not calling when it should be a LinkedIn message, and that would work better. But I really like the point you made, Deeksha, about It isn't like, oh, I saw you watched our webinar. It's really using all of that information to, discuss like those key topics or pain points, and be more of like a valued consultant and building that trust versus talking specifically about the most latest like action that they took that triggered that outreach. I think that is so important with the noise out there today, particularly with your target audience and prospects.
Yeah, I mean, for as good as the tools have become and innovation continues to thrive, there's just a level of common sense that often gets left behind. And it's just about treating people with humanity, right? Being empathetic to the fact that they're busy, recognizing the fact that they probably consumed all of your competitors, or at least registered for your competitors' white papers, visited their site, signed up for their newsletter, and so on. So acknowledging them for registering for one of your reports or a webinar is about as tone deaf of a way to approach an account as possible, right? Like, you need to lead with value. Just like if you're trying to develop a relationship with a new person in your life, like it can't be completely transactional. People you give to get, right? And vice versa. And that's all earned respect. And so that's got to be woven through marketing executions, SDR executions, and seller executions simultaneously.
Yeah, like we said, timing is everything, but it's not just speed to lead, it's precision to lead. That's what I like to say.
Yeah, love that.
Thanks, guys. Deeksha, you got me thinking too, like we were talking about sales follow-up and, AI, and just me personally, I use it on a daily basis when I run sessions like this, creating playbooks for sales follow-up and leaning in on the pain points, not just like the subject of the webinar, the content of the webinar, but coming at it from an angle of the pain points. So I really like that. Yeah. All right, well, we're going to keep things moving. So I think here, the last section we're going to kind of touch on today is a really big thing, and that's like gaps in visibility and with sales teams, flying blind. And so David, we'll start off with you on sales. Like, they can't act on what they can't see. And so what kinds of early stage behaviors should marketers be surfacing to sales, and how do you make sure those insights are actually useful to sales? So we'll kick it off to you, and then Kat, you can pick it up.
Yeah, so I think it's really important to bifurcate transparency versus actionable alerts, right? So transparency is something that I'm extremely passionate about, whereby literally everything that marketing does inside the org is communicated pre-doing so, and all results are communicated inside CRM at a campaign basis, an account basis, an individual prospect basis, even an existing customer basis. So you get to see the entire journey of that person or the account and the adjacent people in that account, what they've done with us. Simultaneously, that's way too much information for the average seller to stay on top of, and we wouldn't want them to, quite honestly. And so how do you kind of break that apart and say, here are the really critical, tip of the spear insights that are happening either right now or a culmination of events that have just occurred, tipped a scoring number from a 3 to a 4. What are you going to do, and how do you elevate those events to something that kicks out either an email alert, Slack notification, Teams notification, a task even auto-assigned inside the CRM, or kick off an automated SDR motion? That type of stuff is where we're spending the most amount of time, right? It's not just about ingesting all of this data. It's about making sales more efficient, even though we're getting far more intelligent about how to work with prospects and drive accelerated pipe. More data and more insights should not translate into slower production and slower output. And so part of that job of marketing is to really be rigid with yourselves to say, okay, what's actually mission critical here to share with the org versus what can be available to them whenever they would like. I think once you kind of nail that and get feedback from sellers around, hey, maybe you made a decision that they do truly find valuable to see more often. That's fine. Make the change. Constantly iterate. But I think giving them the viewpoint that less is more, yet the more is always available is somewhat empowering for both sides of the org.
Yeah, I agree. Sales shouldn't have to guess. We want to give them the visibility into the buyer in real time. Ultimately, we do want to track those early stage signals as far as visiting an ungated piece of content. But we want to make sure that we're helping sales by translating those signals into stories and giving them that visibility.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think going back to for us tiering and putting accounts into high, medium, low with the expectation that the high is the one that is our definition of what you'd call an MQA, but medium is there and so is low has been again game changer because there is actions associated for each one of them. Generally speaking, MQA is the one where we just go wrap our hands around, giving it to the sales, making sure that there are plays set up, the sequences set up, there is the call coverage, there is the buying committee engagement. It just triggers the bunch of actions which are in that high intent signal account, which generally is based on intent, but also your historical conversion likelihood. It's not just coming based on XYZ things. It's these are the things that have worked for us in the past. The one that we're doing primarily for the medium is running more nurture programs, marketing, touching them, air cover, all of that. And again, sales have the visibility that these are their accounts. They're not just left high and dry. They're showing signals, and marketing is now, they've shown intent or they've shown some engagement, and now marketing is amping up its whole engine to really get them to a high stage. The low is still there, typically not something that we would act upon, but be available. And the way it has also unpacked for us is, MQA high signal is the place where you need to go spend all of your effort. But if you were to self-source in specific areas, medium is your next place where you go, because there is already some signals that are spiking, and these are the things that they're spiking for, and these are the typical use cases and why those use cases are relevant. What another game changer for us has been creating sequences that are attached to those use cases, but also contextualized for the accounts. So they're now able to also use that, some of the work that has been done with this, weaving of these different beats together to then pick up, not start from scratch based on those signals that are there, but leveraging some of those use case based information to then also make sure that the messaging is curated. So even when the intent is medium, to your point, Kat, and to your point, David, it's a little bit more precise than just being a shot in the dark. So that visibility is important because they can't act on anything that's not visible. And having that visibility also gives them that marketing is doing way more than what you're actually expected to action on, to build, again, trust that we're building that funnel, we're building that engagement upfront, for which will eventually help us get us close to the revenue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love that one. I think the visualizing everything that marketing does for sales is incredibly compelling. And I periodically just have a passion. No one owns this project, so sometimes I just do it myself, where a deal comes through and I like to just visualize the whole journey of that one account over the last 6 months with us, right?
I have to say that we can hang out afterwards.
Yeah,
exactly. I didn't build this.
Yeah, it's sad, but you could everything from, they saw a few display ads and finally clicked on one, to engaging with some of our free tools, but we still didn't know who this person was, finally registered for a piece of content, went dark for a bit, an SDR tried to reach them, still dark, registered for another piece of content, requested a demo, all of those things all the way through sales close is, I think it's really rewarding for everybody who's been part of that whole chain and that experience. And it also shows everybody this is hard, right? And it shows also that people bounce all around the journey, and it's okay. You've just got to get comfortable with that. And it gets back to the whole being comfortable in the chaos and embracing it, because there's no changing that. So rally around it almost, and that's somewhat empowering to everybody.
Absolutely. And just to add a question, since you're both, you both do this frequently and have been doing this for a while, how do you give visibility into the buying committee? We know, like, over time, right, there is a larger buying committee with influence and impact on, conversion and purchase. Like, how do you incorporate that into your sales visibility and as you're tracking that journey?
Yeah, so I'll let Deeksha go first because I know she's got some cool capabilities to talk about. We do too.
Firstly, like, I don't want this to be a shameless plug, but we do use ZoomInfo, where you do get a lot of that information. So that's the starting point. But with that said, like, I think that has been like the biggest thing for us. Like, your CRM only has so much information. So oftentimes I am creating like plays, which is what we call as a persona expansion and the buying group plays. And the intention of that is going within ZoomInfo and kind of creating those personas, creating those audiences and pushing it out. The expectation sometimes is not even for the sales to engage with them in the first go. Oftentimes are rather have a soft engagement, not like a hard engagement, expecting something. It's just more like saying, hey, I've been meeting with so-and-so on your team and nothing for you to do, but like really cool opportunity that we're trying to unpack. And here are a few of the things we discussed. Most times you don't get replies for that. Most times you don't get, you get opens and may not get replies for it. But that's kind of like some of the soft touches that we've seen, that when those people are then in the meetings and then ZoomInfo name brings up, it's not an unfamiliar zone. They're aware of it. So
yeah,
data mostly coming from ZoomInfo, but then there are like few of the plays that we run on top of it, which is where like my go-to-market plays team will act like SDRs, will act like AEs to provide that air cover into those buying groups. Now it means different for different accounts. For SMB and mid-market, we could scale it. But if it's a really, a strat account or an enterprise account, we have those lists where we give them the visibility, but we don't action on them because we also don't want, like, if there are things happening around which are perhaps not noted in these like CRM notes or other places, like we want to make sure that we are not like over engaging in certain areas and being contextual in more like relevant information that could be happening in some of the conversations. Though the coolest thing again has been that we are weaving in a lot of conversation intelligence data into our like messaging now. So there's still like a crawl, walk, run towards that and checking those data. Like AI has been amazing at scaling it, but checking AI has been the big proportion of our work as well now to ensure that it's like picking up the right data points. It's not like overwriting marketing-y kind of emails, still trying to be like very sales. So it's been it's been amazing, but buying groups is something that, we use our data.
Right.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think, part of the buying group is really all about perception shaping, right? Because some of those people will eventually be in those meetings or behind the scenes, part of even a contract approval process. If they've not heard of your brand and or your products, that's going to be another set of questions that your stakeholder and your champion inside the org is going to have to navigate. So the more that you can do to influence those influencers, the better off you are ultimately. In our case, we're looking at kind of global content consumption behavior occurring across our platform. We're able to see all of these adjacent personas happening inside a given account, what they're doing. And it's sometimes really peculiar. Like you'll see somebody in engineering looking at something related to what like NetLine does, and that wouldn't necessarily stand out as obvious. Yet it's part of that organization's culture, and is clearly part of the influencing group inside that given organization that ultimately informs an output, which is ideally a closed one op, right? And so giving transparency to that, scoring appropriately, and then understanding like how your expectations align to perception shaping to the larger buying group is critical. I think people go wrong sometimes when their expectations are that we're going to hit X number of people in this account. We're going to have like real actionable dialogue with all of those people. Odds are you won't. And if you're going into that, it's a flawed conclusion. Rally around your champions, but be sure to be influencing even if they're not demonstrating much engagement in return, because that brand recall is critical, especially critical to be successful for the champion inside the org that's trying to close the deal with you.
Yeah, agree.
Awesome. I'm just looking at time. So this has been just a fantastic conversation. I do want to leave some time for Q&A. I know we have a very big audience tuning in. So we're going to open it up, I think, and take a few minutes for questions from our audience. So if you have questions, I do see some trickling in. Please go ahead and use the Q&A chat box. It's on the left-hand side of your screen. So you can submit the questions there, and then we will take as many as we can in the next few minutes. It does look like we have a few questions that are trickling in. Diksha, I think I'm going to throw this one to you. So this question from an audience member is, how are you currently scoring leads for sales readiness, and what's been your biggest challenge in making scoring reliable?
I think most of the things are around like combining your firmographic, fit, behavior signals, layering them in contextual way based on where they're in your buying journey, feeding all of that in for your scoring so it's sales ready. I do think we spent a little bit of time on that. So if I were to talk about like the challenge that I am working through, or I don't know if I've worked through, like it's an evolving thing, right? Your scoring is never like a static thing. You're always evolving. But one of the biggest challenges has been like putting the signal strength in context of your account segment. So if you see 3 people within an SMB doing an action, that may actually mean like, it's amazing, let's just go there. But 3 in an enterprise, which has 1,000 people, could be coming from 3 different areas, different unique, orgs who may not even be talking to each other, and it may be just isolated events. And using the same scoring for what you do for SMB versus mid-market versus enterprise, if done the same way, like you're again either going to flood your team with lots of leads or accounts, or you're going to just restrain people from getting them because you're going to have your thresholds be so high. Another thing that becomes like interesting is, so a lot of what we define segment internally initially was based on the number of people within a company. You're a 1,000+ company, you're an enterprise. Now, 1,000+ company for a manufacturing versus 1,000+ company for a B2B sales is very different in terms of the sellers for our product. For a go-to-market function for a manufacturing company of that scale, where perhaps a lot of their workforce is the people on the floor, is very different than that. So again, then the second layer becomes not just the segment, but how does that mean? What does that mean for the industry? And then when you layer those two intersections, then you start figuring it out based on perhaps the number of sales employees or the go-to-market teams that they have specific to whatever you're selling for your product, and then ensuring that you're not using that one-size definition of what an enterprise, which could come out of the box with most of these engines. It's like making it more relevant to what you're trying to sell and what your ICP and the buying group looks like in different companies, and segmenting them based on that is what has been the challenge. And that's what we're like trying to work towards to make it like it's more contextual to that.
Love that. Thanks, Diksha. I know, like our team internally, we're always looking at scoring and redoing it and going back to it. It's not like a one and done thing. It's evolving like all the time. So, all right, cool. We have another question. Again, if you have questions, please submit them in the Q&A chat box. We'll take as many as we can, but we can also follow up with you after today's session. So please do submit your questions. David, I'm going to throw this one over to you. With the use of multiple tools to track buying behavior, how do you ensure sales have clear, actionable insights and not just more data?
Okay. Yeah, this is similar to what we had talked about. I think SLAs are your friend here, right? Which is an agreement with sales that you should probably review at least once a year, ideally more often than that, even if you aimed at just twice a year, if not quarterly, whereby there are very specific understandings and agreements between sales and marketing, and also include your SDR group as well, as to what do they need to see, what are they excited to see, what do they find just terrible to see? And maybe it's just the formatting of it, right? It's not necessarily the data that's in it. This gets back to the fact that like we are evolving as a practice of marketers at a pace that's been like unprecedented, and this will not be slowing down. And so the exhaust of this acceleration is just massive amounts of data and insights. None of it matters if it can't be distilled into actionable based outcomes. And so that's really critical, and how SLAs can be your friend to say, okay, yes, there's all of this stuff over here, and we can arm you with as much as possible, but we want to be conscious of the fact that you have limited cycles. You've got also time to spend with existing accounts. How can we educate you as efficiently and as lightly as possible to make you the most kind of dangerous externally? And the balance there is going to be different for every org. But I think you need to have that dialogue and consistently commit to having that dialogue, and just go into it with the fact that like, this is the rules that we're both going to agree upon. It's not about anyone dictating anything. You're going into it with open eyes. And then again, it gets away from the whole sales and marketing dynamics that exist in a lot of companies. It's unnecessary because as soon as you remove your emotions from it, then you're good. But if you're walking into this saying, no, this is what the SLA is going to be, clearly the outcome is going to be probably a bit contentious.
Okay, so we have another question that's come in. Kat, I think this is a great one for you. I'm going to throw this over to you. We've talked a lot about process, but want to dig into measurement before we wrap up the session today. So Kat, what are some metrics that you're tracking right now if your lead scoring, routing, and activation strategies are working, and what metrics are you tracking? And then what KPIs show that marketing is sending sales the right leads and at the right time?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's really important to not just track volume, but track pipeline efficiency. So, the sales acceptance rate, the conversion velocity, so how fast a lead becomes an op, and then that lead score to opportunity correlation, as well as kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier, that signal-based attribution. So I think at the end of the day, the big win is if sales trust the leads that we send them. That's the ultimate indicator.
Love it. Okay, great. I think that's all the time we have today for questions. I know we want to let everybody get back to work. So I want to just, in closing, thank you very much, Diksha, Kat, and David, for all of the great content that you shared with our audience today and for answering the questions. We appreciate your time. Audience members, this does conclude our session for today. As a reminder, we're going to be sending out the recording within 2 business days. And we really encourage you to share the recording out with your teams, your colleagues, and any questions we did not get to, we are going to follow up with you for sure. So expect to hear back from us. We'll go through the Q&A and just make sure we follow up with folks. Other than that, thanks for your time. I hope you have a great rest of your week. And thanks again to Diksha, Kat, and Dave. Thanks all for joining us. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.